Hello, ladies and jelly spoons. Welcome to 2020. I'm not going to make the obvious vision joke that literally everybody on the internet is making because I have more standards than that. However, I want to thank you for being here for another year, and I want to do a recount of 2019, what games I really liked, what games I really didn't like. Before we get into that, though, there are a couple of ground rules that we need to establish. Number one, to be considered for this list, this has to be a game that I beat in 2019. Whether I played it on stream, on the YouTube channel, or just on my free time off the channel, doesn't really matter. It just has to be a game that I beat in that year. And I am saying beat very specifically. Things like Fire Emblem are not up for consideration because I haven't actually finished them. Beating, for me, is defined as when we don't have any more uploads coming. Because, yeah, I did beat the Golden Deer campaign in Fire Emblem, but that kind of doesn't matter. Like, you know, the game isn't finished yet, and so it's not fair to hold it up and say, okay, here is where we end up. So, the other rule is that before I've always had the, you know, best and the worst. When looking over the games this year, I just didn't actually have that many that were legitimately not very good or well-made games. All the games were competent, or nearly all. There are some that I just straight up did not like, but for the most part, I couldn't actually come to a good list of games that I thought were badly made. So, this is going to be the most impressive and most disappointing games. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The sixth most disappointing game of 2019. Because I am doing top 6 because, well, frankly, when I started doing the countdown thing, I forgot a game and had to add it in later. Whoops. The sixth most disappointing game of 2019 is Judgment. So, for those of you that don't know, Judgment is the new game from the Yakuza creators, and it was kind of trying to take the series in a little bit different direction. Instead of being a, you know, steepled mafia mystery, it was going to show a private detective that had some ties to the mafia industry, but was a little bit more of an upstanding citizen. And so I was into it. I was like, okay, it's sort of like the Yakuza formula, but you'll, you know, introduce a little bit of Phoenix Wright into it, you know, some courtroom drama. We're going to have some, have to, like, solve mysteries and actually, you know, interrogate people, find out who's lying. Yeah, give me a different spin. What I actually ended up getting was a Yakuza game. That was pretty much it. All of the stuff they added to it kind of sucked. There really was no courtroom drama. Oh, that's not true. There was a courtroom drama, but the player's participation in it basically was pressing X to move on to the next piece of scripted dialogue. And the dialogue was really good. Like, it was my favorite part of the game, but I'm like, why did you make this character an attorney if you're not going to actually use that in the game mechanics? Like, it plays almost the same as a Yakuza game. It's just got this really cool section in it where you get this little bit of unfolding drama as part of the story, but I want to play that. Like, that's what I thought I was getting, and I didn't get it, and it made me super frustrated. They end up stripping a lot of the old, like, iconic mechanics out in order to make way for new things, like, ooh, you can tail suspects now. But the implementation of it was sloppy, to say the best. It's like you just go from golden circle to golden circle, having to get out of the way whenever the person's looking for you. But it's, like, super, super, super lenient on whether they'll notice you or not, because there was times where he would turn and look at me and I would realize that there was no circle nearby, so I would run forward past him to the golden circle that was in front of him. I was actually blue, not golden, but you get the idea. Like, it was super lenient on whether or not he would recognize you, and there were other times that it wouldn't even make sense. Like, I would see someone committing a crime and I decided to tail them in order to find out, you know, where the stash was, and so I would start following them. But it didn't make any sense for me to have to hide if he turned around, because he doesn't know who the fuck I am. Like, I'm just some guy on the street walking down the sidewalk. So it didn't even make sense that he'd be like, who are you? I'm like, I'm a dude on the sidewalk behind you. Why am I having to evade? Like, if you're going down the secluded alleyways, it would make sense, but you're not. So yeah, Judgment was a bit of a miss. Like I said, it is the number 6 most disappointing game because it's still a solid game. I still enjoyed playing it, and I had a lot of fun with it. But it definitely was not the game I expected it to be. The 6th best game of 2019, and I guess this proves to you that I'm not just tired of the Yakuza series, because it is Yakuza 2. Yakuza 2 is considered by a lot of fans to be the best of the Yakuza series, and I can see why. I disagree. If you remember from last year, my favorite Yakuza game, or like number 2 on the list, was Yakuza 0, and I still consider Yakuza 0 to be a stronger game, but this one is really, really, really well done. It kind of breaks the Yakuza out of its normal format and mold. The Yakuza series, all the other games, are really kind of about Golden Boy Kiryu, and how, even though he's a Yakuza, he's a super, super nice guy. And this one kind of, it gets away from the infighting amongst the clan, and really pits, you know, it's a story about misunderstanding and revenge, and, you know, trying to come back and answer for things that happened before you were born, and it's a much, much more interesting story than Yakuza 1's. Yakuza 1's was very straightforward, and to be fair, Yakuza 0's was relatively straightforward. It was just made a lot more complex and interesting due to the fact that it was split between Majima and Kiryu's sides. And all the other Yakuza games just seemed about Kiryu, but this one was definitely the most complex story I've seen thus far for the Yakuza series, and it was incredibly interesting and fun. Did a masterful job with Yakuza Kiwami 2, you know, modernizing it, and it was a brilliant execution. I really, really, really enjoyed playing that. And again, I'm a fan of the Yakuza series, so what can I say? So, why is it number 6? Why does it not get higher? I think the big reason is because even though it's very, very, very well done, and granted, this is a little bit where series have a problem, because to be the most impressive game, well, you gotta impress me, and Yakuza 6 was just the Yakuza format done very, very, very competently. But that's not going to impress me. I expect that. Whenever you're really, really good, then your sequels have to, all they can really go is down. It's hard to completely blow me away. The 5th most disappointing game of 2019. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Here's another one, and here we kind of run into the exact same problem that I was just talking about with the, you know, when you have a series and the previous year the series did very well. If you remember, Bloodborne was my 3rd favorite game of 2019. So what's Sekiro doing as the 5th least favorite? Well, frankly, kind of what I just said. Sekiro has probably the best combat of any game I've ever seen, ever. It was beautiful. So, a little bit of background about the Sekiro combat system. I've never played the Dark Souls games, but the Dark Souls games were kind of world-renowned for being these very long, you have to look at your opponents, be very predictive, and when you have a moment, go in and hit them. And the big problem with that, from what I understand, is that against the big bosses, it can take 20 minutes to take the boss down, and one little mistake just devastates you. So it can get very tedious. It's very exciting at first, but once you get the pattern down, it's just so they in order to kind of combat that, in Bloodborne they came up with a new mechanic, and the mechanic worked brilliantly. The mechanic was the blood. Whenever you take damage, there's a period before the damage actually affects you, and if you can damage the boss within that period, it heals the damage you've taken to a certain degree. So because of that, in Dark Souls, again, as I understand, I've not played Dark Souls, but in Dark Souls, when you take damage, the first thing you do is get away from the enemy until an area where you can, you know, heal, and then you go back in. With Bloodborne, when you take damage to a certain degree, yeah, you want to be safe, but you also, if you can stay in on the boss, you can mitigate some of that damage. So it creates this very interesting interplay between, okay, I'm hurt. Do I heal, or do I stay on top of the boss? Do I maintain my advantage, or do I maintain my health? And it's not as clear-cut. In in Dark Souls, it was always, no, just go heal. There's really no penalty to doing that. The only penalty that might exist, again, I'm sorry to keep saying this, but I haven't played the games. But I'm sure some of the bosses will use slightly different attacks depending on your range, but that's it. But we're not talking about Bloodborne. We're talking about Sekiro. The reason Sekiro's combat was so good is that they took that concept and refined it even further. With Sekiro, There is you're effectively either trying to drop your opponent's health to 0 or their stamina to 0. How do you drop their stamina to 0? Dropping their stamina is a lot faster than dropping their health. And you just do very, very on-point parries. Right when they attack, you hit the block button and knock their sword away. And as you keep doing that, they just get more and more fatigued. And if you can get them fatigued to the point where their meter is gone, you can effectively instantly kill them, or in a boss you have to do it a couple times. But you get the idea. Brilliant combat system, loved it. Problem with Sekiro, because remember, this is the 5th most disappointing, so obviously we're going to run into a problem, is everything else. Like, Bloodborne was this Cthulhian, Victorian horror setting with a really, really, really in-depth story, but a story that didn't announce itself, so you had to piece it together throughout the play experience. Sekiro, by contrast, was super straightforward. Like, you figured out pretty much the whole story with very, very limited changes within a couple of, hours of starting the game. People agonize over the Bloodborne story because it's so complicated. Additionally, although like I said, I love the combat system for bosses, it's super tedious for non-bosses. Because they'll chase you, so you can't just run through areas, so you kind of have to clear them. And it gets, they've got stealth mechanics in there, like it's a Metal Gear Solid game, so you can very slowly sneak around. Whereas Bloodborne, you were a lot more, foolhardy and press your luck and stuff. So it didn't feel as good to play because you were more... The other big problem with Sekiro is that there's only really one play style. You're a samurai, you use a sword. Bloodborne had a lot of different weapons, so there was more replayability. So, it's funny, I know I started with just bragging about Sekiro's system, and that's the thing. The core mechanic of Sekiro, the boss fights, are the best video game I've ever played. I love the boss fights. But everything else, the music didn't wow me. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. And then going through the world wasn't as interesting because it was just generic Japan, as opposed to Victorian Cthulhu horror. Like, which of those do you want to go through? So yeah, it definitely could not live up to Bloodborne's legacy. The 5th most impressive game of 2019, Trails of Cold Steel 2. Oh, I was not sure this one would make it. I gotta tell you guys, I was not sure this one would make it. Trails of Cold Steel is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful series, but Cold Steel 2 makes some pretty stupid decisions. So I'll hit the bad and then I'll hit the good. The worst part about Cold Steel 2, and what honestly probably knocks it down on the list some, is that at the end of the game, there is a 12-hour epilogue. After you beat the game, so the story of Cold Steel, without actually spoiling anything, is that you are some students at a military academy, and you're learning stuff, and then Civil War breaks out, and at the end, you've kind of gotten to a breaking point in the Civil War. The immediate threat is gone, so you go back to your campus, and you go around and you talk to your classmates and hear where they're going, and it feels good. Okay, I spent 2 hours on that, whatever, fine. A little bit long, but you know what? You've really built a lot of relationships, that's fine. Then, there is a second epilogue with characters that aren't from the game, they're from a previous game that was never localized, in order to show a different perspective of events. And that might have been awesome if they had localized it, but it just feels really weird and out of place. So that took another about 3 hours. Then... there's like a third epilogue where more stuff happens and there's one final dungeon to go into, and it's not like an EX dungeon, I mean, it kind of is. It doesn't really, you get to do kind of extra weird stuff in there, but it's still treated like part of the plot, so you still got to do it, and that takes like 5 hours, and it's just like, I remember I did 3 streams after I beat the final boss, and I'm like, what the actual hell, game? Also, the plot just seems super convoluted and super convenient for the sake of being the plot. Like, there is this ship that is one of the greatest and fastest ships in the known world, and then they just sort of give it to our party of high schoolers because. It's one of the weirdest and most convenient things I've ever seen. It's ridiculous. But obviously, like I said, I'm not here to rant on the game. The game is really, really, really strong. I very, very much appreciated playing through it. The characterization is amazing, and like I say every time I bring up this series, the Legend of Heroes series has some of the best world building I've ever seen in a game. It is really rewarding to get to go through and explore these and see how the world changes as a result of the actions that are going on in it. You know how in like Final Fantasy VII, for those of you that haven't played Legend of Heroes, as you go around and you talk to random NPCs, they will comment on what's going on right now. Is Meteor coming? Is Shinra? Whatever. You know, they'll actually talk about what's going on in the world. Whereas most games, they never did. They have the same dialogue the entire game through. Well, this is like every NPC has a new one every chapter. It's ridiculous the amount of effort they go into world building. The characters are also interesting. Trails of Cold Steel 1 did not make my list last year because, frankly, there were just a lot of characters that annoyed the piss out of me. I didn't think they were very well done, and Cold Steel 2 made them better. Still, the ones that annoy me still annoy me. I still think that there's inconsistent characterization. Some characters are given a lot more attention than others, but at the end of the day, it's a very good game. The one thing that really holds it back, in my opinion, is that I have a very hard time knowing how good a game Cold Steel 2 is by itself, because it builds so closely to Cold Steel 1. You don't usually get games like that, no, where, I mean, obviously you have games that refer to each other, but these games, it's like, I think if you play Cold Steel 2 and you hadn't played Cold Steel 1, you would just be so thoroughly lost. And that's not bad. I mean, you can certainly have a game that is set up that way, and it works fine. But it is interesting, and I'm trying to make the best list, because I'm kind of putting both Cold Steel 1 and 2 in the spot. Because Cold Steel 2, you know, realizes the vision of Cold Steel 1, if that makes sense. The fourth most disappointing game of 2019. Attilio Iris 2. This one frustrates me slightly, and granted, I will be the first to admit, I think a lot of people just forgot this game even existed, because a lot of people told me Attilio Iris 2 was actually like this sleeper amazing game that everyone kind of forgot about. I played through Attilio Iris 1 primarily on the recommendation of how good 2 was. And then when I started playing Attilio Iris 2, I got a lot of comments like, oh, this isn't the game I was thinking about. I forgot this game existed. So, it's funny. It's so forgettable. It's so forgettable that a lot of people that even know the series kind of forget that that installment even occurred. So I don't think it's really surprising it ended up being super disappointing, because even the fans forget about it. But why is it so bad? Well, again, like I said, this is disappointing, not bad. It's not necessarily that it does anything wrong. It's just there's no real spark of interest or creativity. Like, the characters are okay done. They're a little bit flat. They've only got one central conflict, and once that conflict is resolved, then they don't get paid attention to anymore. They don't feel like dynamic characters. The art style is actually really good, and some of the characters really did grow on me. I do have to say, Attilio Iris is one of the only series I've seen where the whole interplay between the two worlds was very well done, and how you actually had chapters to play as the level 1 character that never gets into a fight, that was awesome. They did handle the introduction of that character late in the game very, very well. There was another game I played, Star Ocean 3, where there's a character you meet early on that gets introduced later, and that's handled terribly. It's just sort of like, and she's with you again. This one, that moment was handled exceptionally well. And I really, really liked and appreciated the way they handled it, and the way they approached it. So, there are definitely areas to improve, but there's also areas that just overall, there are kind of standout moments where it did a very good job, but overwhelmingly, the experience of playing the game was, okay, go here, then go here, and let the plot go forward. And you weren't invested in the plot. You didn't really care about the fate of the world, because it was just so predictable. So, you know, like, by the end, you did kind of get some sympathy for the main villain, but even then, it was competently done, but not something that I was like, this was a lot of fun. This went places I didn't expect it to. It was like, okay, we beat that. The fourth most impressive game of 2019, Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward. I am surprised this one ended up as high on the list as it did. Not because I thought it would be a bad game, not because I didn't think I would be impressed by it, but again, like we talked about before, it is hard for games that impressed me to have their sequel still impress me. And Virtue's Last Reward definitely took a massive step up from 999. And again, 999 is certainly no slouch. 999 did its job very, very, very well. It was interesting. It challenged me. I learned a lot of stuff from 999. And it just kept doing things in the plot that I wasn't expecting. And the Virtue's Last Reward was, I'm sorry to use an internet meme, but like, yeah, hold my beer. Because, oh my god, the stuff that they did in Virtue's Last Reward, the plot was a lot more involved. The twists were well, a lot of them, when I saw them, I'm like, oh, are you serious? And then they'd kind of do a quick flashback of, and here's all the clues you had. And I'd be like, holy shit, guys. Okay, fair play. You did have this in there, and I just, assumed that you're trying to make Fee look cool. Why she could jump so high, stuff like that. Phi, I think it's Phi. Regardless, I think this series is going to be one of my favorite series. I will certainly say I think Danganronpa is a better series, but the Zero Escape series is incredibly done. A lot of fun to do, and I keep being surprised at how playable visual novels are. I'd kind of written them off for a long time as basically picture books. Like, I didn't really think there was that much gameplay in them, but both Danganronpa and Zero Escape have consistently impressed me. The characters were very interesting, and that's in 999, like, obviously the Ninth Man is not much of a character, and some of the other ones don't really come out of their shell. Here, they are all relevant, they are all fun, they are all interesting, they are all good. So, definitely will be Rebeccaning? Definitely will be recommending that to anyone that asks my opinion. I really find that series very strong, especially for people that like puzzles, because this is a puzzle wrapped in a mystery surrounded by an enigma sitting on a question mark. It's good. The third most disappointing game of 2019. Devil Summoner Redao versus the Soulless Army. This one makes me sad to put on here, because it ended up being a viewer's choice over on the Twitch stream. And in all honesty, I think it ended up being a viewer's choice because it was made by the same people that did Persona. For those of you that don't know, the Persona guys, they had a main series, which was the Shin Megumi Tensei series, that was all about, the world being consumed, in times, and, humanity, the remnants of humanity ending up in the afterlife, where, interesting, I do love this concept. The demons, being the physical embodiments of certain things, can't actually make decisions. Like, angels are good. Devils are evil. And so because of that, in trying to decide a society, it's like the angels are like, okay, angel, how should we make our society now the humans aren't gone? Be good! What does that mean? Be good! Like, so the few humans that are strong enough to survive over there end up being the harbingers of philosophy, because they're the only ones that are able to be nuanced like that. And so I really like that series. Then they had the Persona series, which is like, okay, well, before the end of times, what if we had people that are sensitive to these demons are able to make contact with them before the world gets destroyed? And so they had, high school kids, summoning demons and things like that. And that grew into the Persona series. Well, then they came up with the Devil Summoner Redao series, which is effectively, okay, well, so we've established that there are now people in this world that can summon demons. In the Persona series, they were largely okay high school kids that didn't use their powers for evil, but what if they did? Well, then you're going to have some sort of, like, demonic police officer in order to keep things together, and that's who Devil Summoner Redao is. That he's able to summon demons, and he kind of uses it to police the area and keep people from using demons in order to cause calamity around the world. Cool concept. I like it a lot. And it's set in like the 1920s, kind of like the film noir series. And it's just, it's a really cool series, and I was really excited and interested in going in and playing it. And then when I played it, it was like, part of it is, again, that it kind of has that explore a dungeon feeling. Part of it has to do with just the mechanics. A lot of the mechanics seem designed to get in your way and kind of pad the game length out, because you have to get a demon that has this ability in order to move forward. and that's not fun. And its story just seemed very thrown together and tacked on. And from what I understand, that's a little bit like the Shin Megami Tensei series. Like, Persona became super story-heavy, but largely the Shin Megami Tensei series was never like that, and never tried to be like that. It was mostly a combat game with a, like, fluffed-together story. But I'm a story guy, so I was getting into this other series by the Persona group, and I loved the setting of it, and then I just ended up getting disappointed at how shallow the experience actually was. The third best game of 2019. Kingdom Hearts 358 by 2 days. I don't actually know how you're supposed to say that name, but... And this is a weird one. I struggled a lot with where to actually put this one. Because here's the interesting thing about this. First of all, you may remember Kingdom Hearts was never on my good list. Kingdom Hearts 1, I did not understand why the hell anyone liked that game. Chain of Memories was better than 1, but still not good. So this year I actually played 4 Kingdom Hearts games. Like, we got some movement done, guys. This year we definitely picked up for the slack we've had. We played Kingdom Hearts 2, we played 358 Days, we played Birth by Sleep, and we played Recoded. Kingdom Hearts 2 was a competent game. I enjoyed it, but it was nothing special. Like, a lot of people love Kingdom Hearts 2. Maybe that's why I wasn't as impressed by it. It did not live up to the hype for me. It was like, okay, well, yeah, it's combat system, real-time combat system, Disney characters, Square characters, story's okay, cool, yeah, I had fun. Like, that was my Kingdom Hearts 2 experience. And then I got to 358 Days. Now, from what I understand, the actual 358 Days has the worst mechanics in the Kingdom Hearts series. So bad that when they made the HD remaster, they didn't even put the game mechanics in there. They were just straight up like, dude, it's a theater. You watch the cutscenes. So it's weird for me to put this as high as it is when there's not even any game to play. It's basically a movie. But my god, is it a beautiful movie. And I'll be the first to say, again, it's impressed. You know, how impressed am I by these games? And, well, I gotta tell you guys, after Kingdom Hearts 2, which everyone said was the best in the series, I was going to go through the rest of the games because, I mean, I didn't hate playing them, but I wasn't really looking forward to it. And then suddenly this game shows up. It focuses on, you know, new characters that have been introduced to the series. It focuses on the, like, one of the organizations that has been opposing the heroes and gets more into depth into where they are. It really, as far as I remember, I may be wrong, but it doesn't have a single Disney character in it. One of my complaints about Kingdom Hearts is that a lot of the times they're just sort of cruising on popular recognition because, hey, they're a Kingdom Hearts game. Look, it's Ariel. You remember Ariel? It's Sebastian the Crab. Cool, King Mickey. And I'm just like, you know, they use nostalgia as a way to get away from having to make a really, really, really interesting story. So in this game, where they didn't have any Disney or Square characters, and it was all their original characters, oh my god, they saw that was the problem they'd had, and they freaking fixed it. They tell a story about loss and not knowing who you are, and not being able to trust people that say they're your friends. Like, it gets into a lot of subjects that I won't say is the first time I've ever seen them gotten into, but I sure as heck did not expect a Kingdom Hearts game to get into them. Was incredibly impressed and surprised at the depth of this story. And at the end of the day, I'm a story guy. Like, it doesn't actually matter to me how good or bad a game's mechanics are, as long as they're playable. If the story's good, I'm going to be smiling. And this story was fantastic. Got it memorized. The second most disappointing game of 2019, and some of you will be mad about this, Zenki Zero, Last Beginning. Maybe this is just, at the end of the day, I don't like, you know, dungeon crawlers, and that's what Zenki Zero is. Zenki Zero is a survival dungeon crawler with an interesting story that gets more bombastic and random as time goes on. It started off fine. I know I just said as long as the story's good, I don't really mind the game mechanics, and that is true. But in this case, I actively disliked the game mechanics, and the story was not good enough to save it. I've got to say, I feel like the story was better than the game would be. I mean, that's not really a astounding statement to say, I don't guess. If the story was better, the game would be better. Oh my gosh, guys. Making waves here. But if the story was... Because that's the thing. The first 4 or 5 chapters of Zenki Zero are just blasé and boring. They're like... So, the story of Zenki Zero, for those of you that didn't watch it, and I won't spoil it very much at all. Although, obviously, I have to tell you kind of a summary, but I won't tell you how it ends. 8 people wake up on an island, and they have to survive, and these other islands keep showing up on the horizon, and when they go to them, they find out these other islands are places that are important to each of the characters' lives, and through exploring them, you find out about that person's secret sin. You know, what is it that they are the most ashamed of? And it's an interesting experience. You get to know more about the characters, but it's like the characters don't really seem to care, if that makes sense. Like, they'll go through and they'll be like, oh yeah, that was a hard choice to make, that sucks to be you, and that's it. That's the whole... it just doesn't feel like the stories are going anywhere. And finally, after 4 or 5 of these characters, we finally start to get things that have to do with the main plot, and the game picks up massively after that happens. As soon as we get to stuff with the main plot and you run into a character called Kuranosuke, that's really... the game gets a lot better and is deeply enjoyable. And by the end, I was excited to see where the game was going. But prior to that, I won't say I didn't care, but it wasn't holding my interest. And even after Kuranosuke was introduced, and maybe this is just me forgetting things, but they have this weird section, and this one is a bit of a spoiler, and I apologize. They have this weird section where Kuranosuke ends up looking a lot like one of your classmates, and there's this whole question about, you know, is Kuranosuke a clone of that classmate, and was that classmate's actual sin that, you know, he butchered some of, you know, kids, because that's what Kuranosuke did. And then it turns out, no, they just happen to look exactly the same for reasons. Like, I don't think they ever actually went into why that was there, and it just felt so lazy, if that makes sense. The second, so I won't get to it the second best yet, but yeah, at the end of the day, it was a game type I don't play a lot, and a story that it seemed to want to shock and surprise you, but it was just so melodramatic about it that I didn't really buy into a lot of the characters. I thought that it was interesting, but I didn't think it was good. The second best game of 2019. Metal Gear Solid 3. Snake Eater. This one surprised me, because I gotta tell you, for a very long time, as I go through the year, I kind of have a mental Rolodex of what the best games are, and a strong contender for the top 5 for a long time was Metal Gear Solid 2. A lot of people got mad at 2 because there was the whole fake out about the main character. I won't go into more detail than that if you haven't played it, but if you haven't played it, play Metal Gear Solid. The series is amazing. Holy crap. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid 3 was incredible. It definitely, because that's the real difference, is that Metal Gear Solid 2 went places with the plot I didn't expect and did a lot with characterization. Metal Gear Solid 1 was a very weird and common game that went to a lot of new ground and was awesome. But Metal Gear Solid 2 just stopped being a game about cool people doing cool things and really got into a lot of psychology and philosophy and went into a lot of places that I wasn't 100% about. But I thought it was very, very, very smart and well done. And then Metal Gear Solid 3 just went back to Metal Gear Solid 1 in terms of having astounding boss fights, amazing mechanics, really pushing the limits of the system it was on, as well as surpassing Metal Gear Solid 2 in terms of just telling a deeply moving and involved story about loyalty, betrayal, trust, and the reality of being a soldier and fighting due to, whether you fight due to loyalty or honor or passion. And the characters were a lot better in Metal Gear Solid 2. Or sorry, Metal Gear Solid 3. Metal Gear Solid 2 had pretty okay characters, but a lot of them were just a little bit thrown in, and a little bit hammy, honestly. Metal Gear Solid 3 was just super solid. Every character was extremely and supremely interesting to look at and play as. The boss fights, with a couple of exceptions, there were 2 boss fights I didn't absolutely adore, but then there were like 4 that were amazing. And like every boss fight was this just masterpiece of game design that I could not get enough of. I think, you know, I said Sekiro had the best boss mechanics in the world, and I still stand by that. The actual combat system of Sekiro is the best combat system for fighting bosses I've ever come across. But in terms of like boss area design, I think Metal Gear Solid 3 takes it. The mechanics of fighting are better in Sekiro, but the actual, like, because every boss you can either take down lethally or non-lethally, and they all have drastically different types of attacks, different arenas. It's cool. It's amazing. Metal Gear Solid 3 forever. I will also say I do have a rule I should have mentioned at the beginning. Metal Gear Solid 2 does not get to show up on the list because I'm not going to let 2... You know, Metal Gear is just a really good series. I want to be able to talk about a lot of good series. So Metal Gear Solid 2 would be here in the top 5. Not as high as 3, obviously, or 3 would not have gotten the slot. But I didn't want to, like, knock other things off. The most disappointing game of 2019. Kentucky Route Zero. This one makes me super sad. Incredibly sad. Because there was a video by the guys that do extra credits. I am a deep fan of extra credits. I followed them for a really long time. Still follow them technically, but I don't watch them religiously anymore. And there was just this video that was just James talking about how good this game was. And to be fair to James, I think this was written after Episode 1 came out, and Episode 1 was strong as hell. Kentucky Route Zero is this, you're this guy that is exploring the, like, rural south in, like, the Georgia or the Kentucky area, and there's these, like, ghost stories, and you're not quite sure what's real and what's not. You'll talk to people, and then, you know, you'll zoom in on their memories, and then when the camera zooms back out, the person's gone. So, did they exist? Did they not exist? There's a lot of inside references. Like, there's 2 sisters in there. They're actually named after an electric current. It's the first episode is cool, but then it feels like every episode that comes out is just a little bit weirder for the sake of being a little bit weirder. So they stopped telling a coherent, and what made Bloodborne so good is that what you first saw wasn't what was really there, but as more and more and more unfolded, you were able to understand more of the picture you were seeing, although the picture itself didn't change. As the plot slowly came into focus, you started understanding the Fun Europa, so to speak. This one is just, it kind of felt like as you kept playing more and more and more, they just kept putting random weird things in there, like, oh, and now you found out this is happening, and there's robots that are taking your arms, and it's just like, what? Like, I wasn't impressed and amazed at, you know, all the spooky and... Because that's the thing, in the first one, it was very subtle. And it was very like, ooh, I wonder what's really happening. And later, it got less subtle and just got stupid. Like, I really wanted Kentucky Route Zero to be an amazing game, and I ended up getting Kentucky Route Zero that existed, I guess. And lastly, the greatest game of 2019. Put your hands together for Crosscode. Crosscode just makes me happy, guys. Like, a lot of people told me to play Crosscode. It's the Undertale experience all over again. Crosscode was just astounding to me. Really good. Really... I don't want to get into it, because if you have not played Crosscode, I'm betting a lot of you haven't, you need to play Crosscode. The plot, as much as I'm willing to tell you of it, is that there's this alien world that is found, and there's these ancient challenges that are not able to be overcome, So they move in and make these, these things that can make basically an avatar, like from the movie Avatar. They make these so that we can go in and try the challenges where if we lose, we don't actually have people dying. And the main character is someone that ends up like going out of bounds into the development area and is supposed to, and it's this weird like exploration slash game focused, game design focused idea of trying to modify a world in order to let people enjoy it. So it kind of gets into a like game design. It's there's a lot going on in this thing. The mechanics are not the most incredible I've ever seen, but very consistent, and they do a lot with the mechanics. I do think they do a little bit too much of the moving puzzle stuff, but it's still not bad. The other characters are delightful. Some of the greatest characters. Oh my god! I mean, I won't say the greatest character I've ever seen, but for what they do and what they have, you just end up absolutely in love with these guys, and it's really surprising because they don't, it's indie company. They don't have astounding voice acting. Although voice acting, I'm trying to remember if they have voice acting at all. I don't think they do. It's funny. I'm going back and I'm remembering voice acting, but I think I was doing it. But they just sell it so well, and it's just. They don't have a lot to do, and they work overtime to make the most of every opportunity. So these characters just live with you. And the last thing I will say, the main character, there's like a problem with her voice interface, so she isn't able to speak. And because of that, she has a very, very limited vocabulary, but yet even with only like 7 words, they still the pixel art facial expressions do such an amazing job that you really, your heart beats in time with this character. It's amazing. I'm sure I know one person specifically, but some of you are like, wait, Metal Gear Solid 3 lost to some indie game? This game looks like trash. Play it. It's, granted, again, Metal Gear may be the better game. It probably is the better game. But this game completely blew me away. Was not expecting anything nearly so impactful. Oh my god.